that's going to change in 2026. In fact, all the vibe-coded slop out there is creating a whole new class of jobs called code janitors, who need to clean up all the garbage code created by these AI tools. But where is AI itself headed? Everybody knows we're in a bubble with valuations that make zero sense, but the question is, are we at the peak of this bubble, or are we still another decade away from the peak? I'd argue that we still have at least a few more years to keep this hype cycle alive. It's pretty obvious now that LLMs as a technology have plateaued and are not actually intelligent. When GPT-5 came out a few months ago, it was a huge disappointment, and we're not seeing the exponential leaps in intelligence that a truly intelligent, self-improving AI system should be able to make. But don't get me wrong though, the current AI technology is legit amazing. Remember, we're only a few years into this trend. Programmers were the early adopters of the prompt casino, but there are companies out there working day and night to replace stupid, smelly, squishy humans, and if you're someone who does spreadsheets for a living, is a mid-level manager, or even a graphic designer, you might no longer be necessary in the future. AI is definitely stacking up victims in the job market, and even activities that were once respected, like being a Stack Overflow poster, are now completely dead, just as I predicted a few years ago. But another sign the bubble's not over yet is the fact that most AI companies are still private. Eventually a time will come when you see a wave of IPOs in the stock market to hand these bags from VCs over to the public, and when that wave of IPOs arrives, you'll know the charade is coming to an end. And there's a good chance that wave comes in 2026. As SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic are all looking to go public, with some of the biggest IPOs in the history of the world. But before that happens, one of the biggest drivers to keep the AI hype going in 2026 will be robots, humanoid robots. Just a few weeks ago, 1X started taking orders for their Neo robot, which can do your laundry, wash your dishes, and just be a friendly, helpful slave that will never rebel. In addition, Figure robots and Tesla Optimus are being pushed as replacements for manual labor in factories. As of today, the tech is still pretty bad and requires a lot of teleoperation, but companies like Google and Nvidia are providing the base technology that allows any founder to Frankenstein together some clanker and raise a bunch of money. 2026 is the year we'll finally see these things roll off of assembly lines. But what if you could turn yourself into a robot or cyborg? Well, wearable AI tech is another big trend to watch for. We've already had massive flops like the Rabbit and Humane Pin, but OpenAI is still in collaboration with Johnny Ive to make some wearable that will actually be good this time, or so they say. In addition, you've got old companies like Nike building things like battery-powered shoes that will finally allow the white man to jump. And I can't wait for the NBA to approve this and see dudes dunking from half court. But until that day comes, I'd rather just get my entertainment from virtual worlds in my VR headset. The Apple Vision Pro was supposed to finally make virtual reality mainstream, but as I correctly predicted, it was a massive flop. I got a lot of hate from Apple fanboys for making that prediction, but it's not over for the Vision Pro. There are rumors of a lower cost version in the works that could turn this flop around. Meanwhile, Meta is making huge investments in augmented reality, but ultimately, I think the VR/AR space will mostly remain an unprofitable niche area, even though the tech itself is extremely impressive. But the lion's share of the profits are going to continue flowing into chip designers like Nvidia and ARM, and chip fabricators like Taiwan Semiconductor. AI mania has created an insatiable demand for linear algebra, and the barriers to entry in this industry are so high that these companies will continue to slurp up most of the profit. The only company that really screwed things up is Intel, which is both a chip designer and a fab, and in 2025 it looked like it was on the verge of going out of business, but luckily Trump stepped in and had the US government buy a 10% stake in Intel.
Senior. Older brother. It used to be. That worked. I mean, I'm technically not overworked anymore. Hey, old. Old.
Thus preventing the free market from working like a free market, and Intel is poised to continue its turnaround in 2026. It's just too big to fail, but cloud providers like Azure are having a hard time even finding enough electricity to plug in their NVIDIA GPUs. As demand for AI scales up, it could lead to a resurgence in nuclear power, even as many countries in the West start to dismantle their reactors. China, on the other hand, is building all kinds of new reactors, but there are companies like Oklo, which are attempting to get regulatory approval for these small modular reactors, which could potentially give every data center its own self-contained power source. Instead of acres of these ugly intermittent solar farms or wind farms, the future might have these tiny little reactors in every neighborhood. What could possibly go wrong? And we're already seeing this play out, with Zuckerberg announcing a big deal with Oklo to put a reactor in Ohio. But maybe this trend will never play out because computers get colder and faster, like billions of times faster, running at absolute zero temperatures. In 2025, we saw some major advancements in quantum computing, most notably with Google's Willow chip. Then, just a few months ago, Google announced its quantum echoes algorithm that measures disturbances at the subatomic scale. The first time in history, a quantum computer has actually run a verifiable algorithm that surpasses the ability of supercomputers. Quantum computers have been in development for decades now, but what's exciting is that we're finally starting to see the possibility of practical applications in the real world. When quantum computing hits version 1.0, it'll make the AI bubble look like child's play, and American and Chinese researchers are racing to get there first. But European tech leaders are also making big strides in technology, especially when it comes to water bottle caps and with the highly unpopular digital IDs, along with central bank-backed digital currencies. Despite nobody actually wanting these things, bureaucrats keep pushing them forward like it's a speedrun to the Black Mirror season finale. In the near future, every government-endorsed smartphone will become a portal to your bank account, your location, your social media posts, your adult website visits, and so on. The UK has been adamant that digital IDs are coming, while the European Central Bank recently announced that the Eurozone's digital euro pilot is moving into its next phase, with the pilot program expected as soon as mid-2027 and full issuance of a digital currency by 2029. They can take our lives and they can take our freedom, but they can't take our JavaScript. On the back end, Node.js keeps getting better and better and now supports TypeScript files with type stripping. Meanwhile, Dino keeps getting better and now has its own built-in module bundler. But all the kids these days are talking about Bun.js, a runtime that keeps getting faster, but also has built-in support for Postgres and Redis, making it a very tempting choice for any new JavaScript project. On the front end, React.js still dominates despite the fact it sucks, but in the future it will suck less now that the compiler is officially stable. I'd still take Svelte or Vue, or even Angular over React, but there's still new JavaScripts hitting the scene, like Ripple, which should be on your radar in 2026. But if you're looking to level up your skills this year, you need to check
An undergrad accidentally beat a Turing Award winner, a dog outperformed IBM's quantum computer, and Valve's video game code is now running on Meta's data centers. These are some of the wildest computer science papers from 2025. This guy is going to help me with Shor's algorithm over here. He just doesn't know it yet. Alright, first 2025... paper. Now, some of the best discoveries are accidental, so this makes this paper kind of one of my favorite ones. Now, picture this. You're an undergraduate computer science student, and you're trying to work on a research proposal for a project. And during your research process, you decide to implement a hash table. No big deal, you create one new that makes sense to you, and so then you present your research to your professor. Now, your professor takes your research, and he's reading it, and he just drops the paper to the ground, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm about to fail this paper. But instead, he says, oh my gosh, you just beat a Turing Award winner. And this is actually a lot easier than it sounds. So hash tables are kind of like driving through a parking lot. Everybody knows when it's 50% full, this is super simple. You just drive into the parking lot, park right away, you're good to go. But everybody also knows once you start to hit about that 99% capacity, it gets really difficult to find a free parking spot, and you're just driving around and around until you can find that one last available space. Now, in computer science terms, this is called open addressing without reordering. And Andrew Tao, a Turing Award winner, said that the best you can possibly do is big O of 1 over delta. Kripivin, the undergrad student who unintentionally came up with this optimized solution, created a solution that was big O of log squared of 1 over delta. And if you can't just like magically picture that in your mind, don't worry, just look at this graph. Now, the old original Turing Award winning solution is in red, and then the new undergraduate solution is in green. So that's really, really cool. Going back over to our parking lot analogy though, this is kind of like if you took all of the different parking spots and then you separated them into different individual sections. So if you're a car coming in and you're trying to find a free parking spot and you see this one section is full, you can completely skip it and go on to the next section that might have an available slot. Heavy sigh. He doesn't care about what I'm saying. Now in 2025, they finally published the formal mathematical proof for this particular concept. And I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, wow, well, if this optimized version is now out there and mathematically proven, well, why doesn't every different standard library out there start implementing this technique? Now, unfortunately, mathematical proofs for optimizations don't always equate to actual real optimizations in practice in computer science. So Google's Swiss table, for example, is extremely optimized for the L1 CPU cache. Kind of big surprise that the real world is actually really complicated out there, but you can implement this methodology yourself in your own project for practice, and I definitely highly encourage you to do that. Now it's time for our next .2025 story, and this story is about game developers versus the Linux kernel. When I hold it like this, it just gives me the strongest urge to just throw it. I don't know why. So for years, historically, decades, the CPU scheduler has been built just directly inside of the kernel. And keep in mind, for reference, the CPU scheduler is the thing that decides what runs right here, right now. And so previously, changing the algorithm for the CPU scheduler has been a really complicated process. Now, standard CPU scheduling algorithms tend to prioritize fairness. If you think of your CPU as like a CPU pie, it prioritizes everything in getting a nice equal slice of the CPU pie. So it's a really polite kind of process over here. Now, games do not care about politeness or fairness. They care about frame times. Ideally, what you would want is you'd want to have a separate CPU scheduler for your gaming processes than you do for your regular scientific computing processes, for example, since nobody wants to have a sudden lag spike inside of their game. But historically, this is extremely difficult to swap out these kinds of algorithms. But let me put my Google hat on for a second. Where is it? Since I do work there after all. And now I get to brag a little bit that Google was actually the first one to solve this problem. They solved it back in 2021. They released the Ghost framework, which allows you to swap out CPU scheduling algorithms entirely in user space. Later on, Meta created their own CPU scheduler called SCHED-EXT, or Scheduler Extension in BPF. And this essentially allowed you to swap out the entire CPU scheduler without having to involve the Linux kernel developers or even having to reboot the machine, which just like absolutely blows my mind there. Oh, let me just swap out the entire computer and still keep the whole thing running. That's cool. But Valve really cares about their gamers. Now, I don't have a Steam Deck in front of me right here, but imagine I did. Imagination. Now, Valve created their own CPU scheduler specifically for the Steam Deck. Their CPU scheduler is called SCX LabD, which stands for Latency Critically Aware. Virtual deadline scheduler. Please stop naming your project so long that I have to remember. But basically what this does is it prioritizes deadlines over throughput, which is kind of a fancy way of saying, I don't care if I receive a notification a little bit late, but don't you dare drop a single frame of my game. Now, most requests are going to come in pretty fast, but occasionally that 1% or that 0.1% of the time, a frame is going to take way longer to load. Now, in programming terms, we call this tail latency, and it's exactly the culprit for the kinds of stutters that Valve is absolutely trying to prevent. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you think about it, a lag spike on a game and a slow request on a web server are mathematically the same kind of problem. And really interestingly, recently in December 2025 at the Plumbers Conference in Tokyo, Meta actually admitted that they're using Valve's CPU scheduler on their own data centers. If you think about it, that means that the same algorithm that's being used to keep your game running smoothly on your Steam Deck is the same one that's actively being used to keep things like Instagram feeling super snappy. That was a really interesting talk, and I'll link to the slides in the description of this video. Now it's time for the next 2025 computer science paper, and I know this is the one you've actually been waiting for because you're like, what's up with the quantum dog? This one is what I would call an anti-hype paper, and I love it. It's called Replication of Quantum Factorization Records with an 8-bit Home Computer, an Abacus, and a Dog. And it is kind of meant to be funny and like a joke paper, but it does also have some really good points inside of it. Now, like it or not, there's been kind of a lot of exaggeration in the news lately related to quantum computing. You'll just suddenly see a headline out there that's like, new advancement in quantum computing, suddenly all encryption is dead. Well, this one is by Peter Gutmann and Stephen Newhouse, and they attempt to replicate some of the mathematics of these multi-million-dollar quantum computers with more primitive biological hardware. The name Gutmann might sound a little familiar to you because he invented the Gutmann method back in the 90s, which is that 35-pass secure wipe method for hard disk drives. And there's a lot of gold inside of this paper, but specifically the dog section tries to mock compiled Shor's algorithm. A lot of early on quantum computing records essentially cheated. The circuits were tailored to one specific number, not general compute machines. So how do you replicate a compiled Shor's algorithm? Well, it's really simple. You have Gutmann over here, and he's acting as the compiler, and he gives instructions over to his colleague's dog Scribble, who is acting as the quantum computer. And what is the instruction? The instruction is to bark 3 times, which he would fail at currently. And that's it. And with that, they were able to successfully replicate IBM's 2019 quantum factorization record. But that wasn't even enough for them. They didn't just want to replicate it, they wanted to one-up it. Now Gutmann gets Scribble the dog to bark 5 times, and this factored 35. And that, according to the paper, is enough to exceed the IBM quantum computer that they were trying to beat. Who would win? A $40 million quantum computer, or one good boy? But the main point of the paper is a lot less silly because they propose a new quantum factorization evaluation criteria for future research. The proposal basically states that until quantum records are based on random primes that are unknown to the experimenter without pre-processing, it's pretty much meaningless. And I'm not trying to say that quantum computing is fake or anything. It's definitely real and it's definitely cool out there, but this paper is basically just some mathematicians trying to poke fun at some of the scary headlines out there designed to make the general public nervous. This is kind of a good paper if you want to send it to your friends periodically who think that RSA encryption is dead. He sees fork and he thinks I'm about to eat food and he wants some. He doesn't even have any food. For this next paper over here, we're going to be talking about forks. No, not these kinds of forks, although, look at this. Perfectly balanced, as things should be. For this particular paper,
Lori? Weird. I appreciate her being weird.
won Best Paper Award for one of the ACM categories, and it won it for a really good reason because it kind of creates like this time machine for RAM. Now normally when you're running a fork call, you're cloning a process or something, and all of this is happening on just one single machine. But CXL fork over here extends this concept to work across an entire cluster. Imagine you have a server and one of your really cool posts suddenly goes viral. Well, you need to spin up a ton of different nodes to be able to handle that large traffic spike that is suddenly happening. And that means a ton of different cold starts, you have to have a booting up process, you have to load a ton of libraries. All of these different kinds of processes take a ton of time. So what CXL fork does is it takes a snapshot of an already warmed up process, and you have this shared memory across a ton of different machines. So that means when you have a sudden network traffic spike, all of these machines can read the same underlying data using this really cool memory fabric called CXL. And they measured that about 72% of a process's memory never changes. So why would you need to copy that a million different times across a million different processes? And the neatest thing is that because they're basically snapshotting a process while it's in a clean state, if something goes wrong, your program crashes, well, whoop, you can just CXL fork, revert, and now you have the clean running process once again. I could use this in my life. Back when I worked in aerospace, I actually did something really similar to that using a tool called CREU, which stands for Checkpoint Restore and User Space. And the entire idea behind that project was to be able to quickly restart mission-critical processes that might have failed during execution without having to reboot the entire airframe. This isn't really like a weekend project you can kind of play around with, but if you do want to get your hands dirty, you can play with CREU since it is free and runs on any Linux Linux box. Now, CXL Fork is designed to run on really expensive enterprise hardware, and it's frankly a lot more interesting because it's also designed to run across multiple different compute nodes, but you can kind of get introduced to it by playing with Creo, and you will start to see this trickle down over the next few years. Now on to our next 2025 computer science paper. Here's something that nobody talks about. Your CPU is bored. Like really bored. In fact, modern processors these days are so good and so fast that they spend like the majority of their time just waiting for memory. Now, computation is cheap, moving memory is expensive, and this mismatch is exactly where all of the interesting mathematical research and innovations are actively happening. Which brings me over to Dijkstra's algorithm, and you might have heard this. This is the really common algorithm for the shortest path. You've probably heard about it in one of your computer science classes. It's extremely complex but extremely useful, and optimized variants of this are used in really important things like computer networks or like mapping applications. Dijkstra's algorithm was actually mathematically beaten in 2025 and nobody noticed. Now, I personally think it's kind of a big deal, but it's probably going to take like approximately 15 years. Now, I'm not going to lie, this paper is extremely complicated, but it is mathematically provably faster. The only problem is it's weird, it's recursive, and it does like a ton of different pointer chasing. So in actuality, this is terrible for the cache on a regular CPU, so it still doesn't look faster. But if you think about it in the theoretical complexity, Dijkstra's algorithm is m plus n log n time complexity, and this particular one is big O of m log to the 2/3 n.
Just let me know.
So it is provably faster. The major catch here is just that the number of nodes needs to be astronomically large to be able to see the difference between Dijkstra and the new algorithm and see it actually winning. So I'm not actually going to be able to show it winning with benchmarks. Think like billions of nodes, astronomically large. But what I can do is I have implemented both different algorithms here in C++, and I'm using Google Benchmark, which automatically warms the cache for you and everything, and I'm going to be running the two algorithms against each other and comparing the ratio of their speed as the number of nodes increases. So let me just pull up my terminal here, and I'm going to run my benchmark. So we're increasing our nodes, and you can see the ratio is indeed getting smaller as we do increase that number of nodes. So why does this matter? Well, historically it takes about 15 years for raw computer science theory to make it into the actual implementations of standard libraries. Delta stepping is a really good example of this in the supercomputing space. And not only that, but the pressure to reduce data movement is just growing and growing, and moving data across a bus is much more expensive than on-device computations. So the real winner for this paper, in my opinion, isn't the full algorithm itself, it's the components that actually comprise it. And I think that there's going to be more derivations of this work as it goes on. Now you just watch, someone's going to take the filtering logic from this paper and implement it on like computational memory, like Samsung's HBM PIM architecture or something, and then suddenly we're going to have an entirely new class of algorithms to play with, right? And if you're interested in hearing more of my theories on this, You can follow me at Lori Wired on X, where I have like a whole series about how these kinds of algorithms are going to become increasingly relevant over time, and how memory tiering is going to like end up eating the world. I think it's important to take a look at a lot of the positive things that are happening in computer science. Since there's a lot of negativity in this field, a lot of people don't focus on the amount of progress that we make in computer science every single year. So go out there, go read some research papers, go write some research papers that might end up in next year's video. As always, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Stay cozy, and until next time,
Hey there! Most people hate taxes, especially when they're not being used the way they should be. You've probably seen those news stories about how the rich somehow avoid paying taxes, while regular people like you are left paying the bill. Isn't not paying taxes supposed to be illegal? So how did they get away with it? Well, the rich have so many tricks, some of which I've covered in my previous video, How the Rich Avoid Paying Taxes, link in the description. And one of their favorite strategies is using tax havens. No, it's not a heaven or paradise where taxes go to die. So how does this tax haven actually work? In this video, we'll dive into what a tax haven is, how it works, some famous examples, and the solutions. So let's get started. Section 1. What is a tax haven? So the word tax haven comes from tax, which is, well, tax, and haven, which means a place of safety or refuge. Yeah, it's haven, not heaven. So a tax haven is a country or territory that people or businesses can pay very little to even no taxes at all. And not only that, a tax haven also provides strict privacy, which means they won't tell anyone who's putting their money there. Sounds like a dream come true, right? With little to no taxes, combined with high secrecy and privacy, it makes tax havens really a heaven and paradise for rich guys and companies that do not want to pay taxes. Actually, there isn't one clear definition of a tax haven, which is why some people might say country X is a tax haven, while others say it's not. But to be considered a tax haven, a country or territory typically has three main criteria. First is little to no taxes. Taxes like income taxes, corporate taxes, or other taxes are super low or don't exist. Second is strong privacy. Your identity will be kept secret and rarely disclosed. Third is stable country. The country is politically and economically stable, so people feel safe keeping their money there. So now you already know the definition of a tax haven. So how does a tax haven work? Well, we'll talk about it in the next section. Section 2.
I have to start by saying this is not clickbait, nor is it a joke. I really have invented a new type of compass, and today I'm releasing it into the public domain so that no manufacturers can claim it or lock it behind a patent. I do need to say right at the start that the compass that I've invented, or that type, it isn't based on new physics. The science behind it has been known for hundreds of years. So what makes my idea unique, and what exactly am I giving away? Well, it's this. I know it doesn't look very impressive, but this simple metal ring can be used to create a base plate compass like this that works without any fluid. That is, to me, that's amazing. It means that no matter what the temperature or the altitude or whatever other excuses compass manufacturers come up with for their compasses having bubbles, if you use this, it can never get a bubble because there is no liquid inside the dial. So that's that. Right then, let's skip the waffle, otherwise I'll start going off on one. How exactly does this work? Well, I'm trying to think. I really should prepare this sort of thing, shouldn't I? As you probably know, Every land navigation compass has one thing in common. It's got a tiny magnet which is rotated by the Earth's magnetic field until it settles north-south. Now, some magnets are circular, some of them are needle-shaped. As an example, here we have a Connaught 4 military compass, and here we have a Kamenga M3H military compass. So there are different variations on it, but they all have a magnet which swings around and faces north-south. And it sounds very simple, and it is. But because of this, all compasses, all land navigation compasses, suffer from two very basic problems. The first problem, the magnet inside your compass is extremely weak. And if you add this to the fact that the Earth's magnetic field itself is incredibly faint, that means the force between the two is tiny, literally fractions of a Newton. One day I may do a video describing how shockingly small that force really is. The second problem is that compasses don't instantly snap north. They swing and they overshoot and they wobble backwards and forth, and eventually they settle. There's not much you can do about the first problem. You know, the Earth's magnetic field is what it is. Some manufacturers, though, have tried to use stronger magnets inside their compasses. As an example, the Silver Neo. That's got a compass with some neodymium inside the needle. But even that doesn't solve the wobble. Over the years, manufacturers have tried lots of different ways to reduce the settling time or the wobble. And today there are two main methods used in all land navigation compasses. The first method is fluid damping. The needle sits inside a capsule filled with fluid, and this is usually mounted onto a clear plastic acrylic base plate. As the needle swings, the needle resists the motion through shear forces in the fluid, so the needle settles much faster than it would do if it was exposed to the air. Method 2 is induction damping. So the way this works is these are mainly military compasses, so they're made of metal just because it's stronger than plastic. And the needle is it's got a conductive plate underneath it, and as the magnet swings, the magnet itself induces tiny electrical currents. They're called eddy currents inside the plate, and those currents inside the plate create their own magnetic field, and that field is always opposite to the motion that created it. So the needle creates magnetic fields in the plate which move in the opposite direction or flow in the opposite direction, and that's what slows it down. So the swinging needle effectively breaks itself. As an example, this is a Brunton 9077, and also I've showed you the Francis Barker already. You can think about it as magnetic braking, so there's no friction. There's nothing touching the magnet, just physics doing the work. The conductive plate it's normally copper or some form of copper alloy, and each manufacturer will have their own preferred recipe. But the requirements are very simple. The metal must be non-magnetic and highly conductive. The better the conductivity, the stronger and faster the damping effect, so it slows the wobble down. Now, both systems have benefits and flaws. Fluid-filled compasses, like this, they let you see the map through the dial, which makes navigation really, really simple. But on the downside, bubbles can form inside the fluid. Induction damped compasses, they can't get bubbles because there is no fluid for the bubbles to form in, but you can't see the map through the dial. So you'll usually need to have a protractor with you to take accurate map bearings. And most non-military people don't carry a protractor. I don't. So some manufacturers have tried to combine the two, so you get the benefits of induction damping and of a base plate compass that you can see through. As an example, this is a 1960s Silver Type 5. This is the most modern one that I can find. This is the Kamenga Destinate. They both combine. They've got induction damped dials, and they've got a plastic base plate. The problem with these is you've got the benefits of both, but you've also got the flaws of both. So you still can't see through the dial, so you still need a protractor to be able to use them accurately. And these are never commercially successful. I see why some compass manufacturers try and sell them, but they've never been commercially successful. No company has ever managed to sell a lot of them. So the reason, as I said, is you still need a protractor, a separate protractor to work accurately with a map. Okay, that's all the background. Let's get back to my invention. Now, I know these don't look very technical, these metal rings, but you won't, I don't know if you can see it from on the screen, I don't know if it's apparent. These were precision engineered in the UK, and when I mean with precision, I mean exactly that. They each have exactly the same internal diameter, but each ring is exactly 0.1 of a millimeter thinner than the next one. Now, I've done a lot of testing, and I've made a lot more than these. These are just a few that I've brought to show you today. But each ring is also made from a slightly different copper alloy. And I've calculated that using a logarithmic equation based on its mass. So different size rings means different mass and different damping characteristics. If you're a compass manufacturer or a compass nerd, there's a lot of those out there. I'll show you the technical details right at the end. But here's the key point, and this is important. Up to now, all compass damping has always been done using a flat conductive plate underneath the needle. But the physics doesn't care whether the conductor is underneath the needle, above it, or around it. All it cares about is the relative motion between the magnetic fields that are created by the needle and the conductor. When a magnetic needle moves near any conductive non-magnetic metal, it induces eddy currents in that metal. Those eddy currents, they create, as I said earlier on, a magnetic field which opposes the motion of the needle. And this is what induces damping. All I've done is change the geometry. So instead of a solid plate underneath the needle, I've placed the conductive material in a ring around it. The needle moves inside the magnetic ring's braking field. Hopefully that's a good way of putting it, a braking field. And this induces eddy currents in the ring itself. It's the same physics as used in 99% of military compasses. Sorry, there's some shooting going on just over the other side of the hill. That's what the gunfire is. I've not.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it.
Let's not go any further with that. I don't know what they're shooting at.
Want to train with me
I was
sometime?
just shooting at something. So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, the eddy currents are created inside the ring itself. It's the same physics. It's the same principle, just a different arrangement. Now, before I show you this working, remember, as I said, I'm releasing this into the public domain. And that's because you can't patent something that everybody already knows. You can't patent you can't take out a patent on the general idea of a compass, a magnet that points north or south. The Chinese were using them thousands of years ago to sail as far as Arabia. The Vikings used magnetic navigation to reach what is now North America. You can't patent induction damping, as that's been known since at least, I think, 1824, when Francois Arago described it. You can't patent fluid damping inside a compass, because over 300 years ago, in the 1690s, Edmund Halley demonstrated a fluid-filled compass to the Royal Society in London. So the concepts are ancient. What you can take out a patent on is a specific mechanism or a component or a manufacturing method or a particular process, a combination of processes. And that's exactly where my idea fits in. It's a new way of controlling the needle's motion using a conductive ring around the needle. And I'm giving it away for free. I'll put this onto your screen as a demonstration. Here I have two identical compass needles, one with my metal ring around it and the other one without. I'll move them both to the same position and now watch what happens. When I release them, the moving magnetic needle induces eddy currents in the metal ring, which slows down the oscillation, and the needle settles north-south much quicker. I've tested this literally thousands of times with different size rings, these things here.
I mean, those are the two things. Oh, Phantasm is not attractive. Also. It's good. Neutral. Somewhat satisfied, maybe. Neutral. Weapons. Okay. It's really annoying. Like, it took me a while to figure it out. No, I don't care. Ditto.
Now, the needle inside the ring always settles in just a few seconds. The undamped needle takes much longer. I imagine it's still on your screen. I'm not going to give away the exact figures, and I'll explain why later, but the difference is dramatic, and most importantly, it's repeatable. That is really important in any scientific experiment. Well, I won't class myself as a scientist. I'm a navigation instructor. But in this experiment, the results are repeatable, and they are guaranteed. So what does this give you, this little metal ring? It gives you a compass, like these two here, with induction damping that can be mounted onto a transparent base plate, and it doesn't need a protractor like these two do. And obviously it can never form a bubble because there's no liquid. The ring size and the alloy that you use is very important. And yes, I do have a combination that performs as fast as the best compasses that are on the market today, but I'm not going to tell you which one. And the reason I'm not going to give you all these little snippets of information is, well, it's quite simple. Compass manufacturers need to make a profit. they need to have their own version, their own mix, their own copy.
So yeah, okay. Well.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature...
Настали такие времена, что все мы с вами оказались в информационном рабстве у одного человека, Дональда Трампа. Каждый день разговоры и новости только о том, что сегодня придумал делать американский президент. И мало того, что его поток идей не иссякает, так еще и за словами следуют действия. Поэтому сегодня мы снова обсудим, чем там занят президент Трамп, чье внимание полностью обращено за пределы американских границ. Он угрожает захватить Гренландию, разбомбить Иран и забрать всю венесуэльскую нефть. И абсолютно весь мир воспринимает эти угрозы всерьез, потому что кресло венесуэльского президента Мадуро еще даже остыть не успело. Интересно хотя бы попытаться понять, какие слова обернутся делом на этот раз. Для этого посмотрим на заявления Трампа, его друзей и врагов в США, а также на реальные действия правительства, которым Трамп управляет. Прежде чем начнем, напомню, по ссылке в описании вы найдете бесплатные способы по обходу российских блокировок. Мы каждый день сами их тестируем и обновляем, так что все работает. А спонсирует все это дело Shiva VPN. У сервиса круглосуточная поддержка и 3 бесплатных дня на тестирование, так что попробуйте. Нынешние времена отличаются от всего, что было раньше, в том числе от первого срока Трампа. Да, трепать языком он умел всегда. Всю политическую карьеру, как только в радиусе 500 метров появлялась телевизионная камера, Трамп обязательно начинал болтать о всех вещах, которые его заботили. Мигранты, налоги, геополитика, личные качества присутствующих журналистов и так далее. Собственно говоря, такая манера поведения и привела Трампа тогда в Белый дом. Однако в первый срок Трампа оказалось, что правит он плюс-минус как обычный республиканский президент. Трампа окружили карьерные профессионалы в администрации и старая республиканская гвардия в Конгрессе, и всем им удавалось гасить его импульсы. Поэтому именно действия Трампа были не особо выдающимися. Понизили налоги, встретились с Ким Чен Ыном, пофоткались, значит, с ним же, ну и живем дальше. Теперь все иначе. Сменились и окружение Трампа, и его собственное ощущение безнаказанности. Поэтому теперь, когда Трамп говорит что-то, что он собирается сделать, он может взять и реально сделать. Особенно это касается внешней политики, где у президента власть ограничена очень слабо. Вот этим направлением он сейчас и занимается. Причем пальба идет круговая, во все стороны. Первый по курсу Трампа – Иран, который сейчас обсуждают больше всего. Там еще с конца декабря идут масштабные протесты против правительства Исламской Республики. Конечно, в этой стране волнения случаются каждые пару лет.
Which tower? This tower. Yeah, well, not interested currently.
а режим стоит. Но нынешние выступления самые крупные за долгое время. Более того, изначальные причины экономические. В Иране и так долгое время была жуткая инфляция, а в декабре иранский реал стал официально стоить 0 денег, и люди вышли на улицы. Довольно быстро экономические претензии перешли в требование снести уже к черту аятол, потому что они надоели всем. Правительство ответило отключением интернета и стрельбой по протестующим, как обычно. Жертв очень много. Но тут уже подключился Трамп. Сказал, что если Иран начнет убивать протестующих, то будут последствия. И четко встал на сторону митингующих. Сказал им захватывать правительственные здания и крушить режим. После чего дописал капсам: «Помощь уже в пути!» Вчерашней ночью появились знаки, что удар реально может быть. Америка начала вывозить солдат со своей катарской авиабазы Аль-Удейд. Скорее всего, чтобы защитить их от ответных иранских ударов. До США Иран своими ракетами, конечно, не достанет, но вот по базам на Ближнем Востоке они уже били. Так что ход логичный. Также прошлой ночью Иран закрывал свое воздушное пространство для всех самолетов. Стандартный ход, когда ожидаешь, что вот-вот начнутся боевые действия. В итоге ничего не случилось. СМИ пишут, что Трамп в последний момент остановил атаку. Впрочем, если Трамп реально решится бомбить Иран, то ничего его не остановит. А всякие сомнения в его подобных желаниях отпали прошлым летом, когда Трамп уже взял и бахнул по Ирану во время войны Ирана с Израилем. Все предыдущие президенты опасались, а вот Трамп просто отправил бомбардировщики и взорвал иранские ядерные объекты. Результаты той атаки до сих пор не особо ясны. Но понятно, что никакого страха перед ударами у Трампа нет. Страха, похоже, поубавилось и у остальных в Америке. Потому что никакой серьезной критики возможного удара по Ирану не наблюдается нигде. Ястребы в Конгрессе, понятное дело, только рады, а умеренные республиканцы не видят смысла критиковать президента, если от ударов по Ирану Америке, как выяснилось летом, все равно ничего не будет. Демократы Трампа критиковать счастливы, но они уже перешли в предвыборный режим, и месседжи выбирают более осторожно, фокусируются на внутренних делах, вроде рейдов иммиграционной полиции и инфляции. Если уж снова бомбить Иран, то трогать остатки ядерных объектов вроде как нет смысла, ведь цель поддержать протестующих иранцев. Что вообще ставит серьезные ограничения. Нельзя, чтобы погибли гражданские. Все-таки немного контрпродуктивно бомбить тех, кого собирался поддержать. Если Трамп захочет нанести удары, то надо будет бить по зданиям и базам корпуса Стражи Исламской революции, на котором держится иранский режим. Чуть-чуть сократились и опции для ударов, потому что авианосец, обычно припаркованный в Персидском заливе, Трамп отправил на Карибы для устрашения Мадуро. Но мы тут все-таки об Америке говорим, так что оружия хватает. Есть авиабазы в том же Катаре и в Кувейте. Ну и рядом плавают эсминцы с ракетами «Томагавк». Вот только Трамп, возможно, уже передумал все это добро применять. По крайней мере, на словах. Иран вчера заявил, что откладывает смертную казнь протестующего, которого арестовали всего несколько дней назад. Это прямой ответ на угрозы Трампа, который...
A long, long time ago, there was a young woman who ran away from home. After spending the last of her mora, she trod through the cold of winter, shivering in her threadbare clothes. Suddenly, the young woman found herself stepping out onto thin air, and she fell through into a strange place. But before she could react, a voice rang out from somewhere in the distance. This is the secret home of Nicola Coco, the great mage everlasting. O destitute one, tell me your heart's greatest wish, and with my guidance, you shall attain it.
Whoa! That was a strange voice. Nicola Coco. Who's that again? Do we know her?
The young woman was in awe of the mage's magnificence and beauty. After a lengthy silence, she solemnly declared, "O great mage from afar, how beauteous and wise you are! The moment I beheld you, my heart began to flutter. All my heart desires now is to make your wishes mine. The subtlest of smiles appeared on the mage's face as she replied, Very well, then I shall task you with performing certain deeds on my behalf, such as those that are within your ability. Your guide is here, and your reward awaits you in the days to come.
Guide? Does that mean this glowing orb?
Secret home, said the young wanderer, with a look of confusion on their face. Where is this secret home of which you speak? The mage's voice grew somewhat flustered upon hearing this question. Wait, does it make sense for this to be a bashful character? Oh, never mind. I'll keep it in for now. Mr. Nine can always refine it later. Ahem. It is rather rude to ask such questions of a mage, young one. The Mage's Lodge is under renovation. Very soon you shall be stunned by its grandeur. This shall be your trial. Offer up your strength and help this great mage to build her territory. As the young woman continued forth, she noticed many exquisite statues dotting the mage's territory. What are these? She asked, puzzled. These are all those who opposed me. They underestimated the power of a mage, and thus were turned to stone. I quite like that. A spur-of-the-moment addition, but dare I say it was a good one. A mage ought to be a powerful and dangerous figure. Danger lends a certain mystique, and without mystique, the world would be a very dim place. But turning people to stone at the drop of a hat? Is that too over the top? And no one wants to be around someone that capricious. Okay, I think I'll dial it back and turn it into more of a vague warning. Upon hearing this, the youngster broke into a cold sweat. But then, the mage's laughter broke the silence. Did you fall for it? I was merely joking. These statues are just my way of capturing a certain moment in time. Anyway, statues. That's what I need your help with. The Mage's Lodge is feeling a little empty, and I should like to fill the space with some more adorable companions.
Oh no, she's gonna turn the more or less girl into a statue.
Well then, young one. Now you have learned of the troubles faced by this mage. Nicola Coco requires your aid to build her sacred territory. The mage poured a cup of tea for her visitor. What say you?
Wait a minute! Shouldn't we think twice before going all in on this? We don't know anything about this person! And she seems a little weird. Huh? Although, having said that, this teacup looks kind of familiar. Nicola Coco. Ah! Is it Mage N? Nicole?
Correct. What do you think of my story?
Hard to say. It's not finished yet, surely. What happens to the characters in the end?
I haven't decided yet. I need to renovate my home first. Perhaps I'll have a burst of inspiration after that. Anyway, if you can hear my voice, I assume that means you're currently in Nodcry. In which case, could I trouble you to gather a few things for me? Exactly. I'm thinking of building a few more statues to decorate my home, but I'm lacking inspiration at the moment. So, I was thinking you could take some photos to give me some ideas.
Are you serious? Alright then, leave it to us! Wait here. We'll head out and see what we can find. But remember to finish the story once the statues are done.
You're telling me I'm moralless? have a bunch of more. 3 million. That's not that much, to be honest.
The mage's story is starting to take shape. I think I'll delegate this next section to Mr. 9. A great mage is defined above all by her beauty and powerful presence. Perhaps an exaggerated laugh might help her stand out more. It looks like someone has been bewitched by the power of the great mage everlasting. Is that laugh too annoying? No, it'll be fine. It's all in writing anyway. No one will hear it out loud. My renovation plan is complete. But where to start? Everyone knows you can't just conjure a house out of thin air. Or could I? Alchemy could work. The only raw materials I need are bricks and wood. Yes, I'll go with that. Far easier than building everything by hand. A mage's home has to look very different from an ordinary house. I'm just not sure what that means in practice. One thing's for certain, though. It has to be an ancient, mysterious, and otherworldly place that will endure for hundreds, even thousands of years. Yes, that's good. Just what people would expect from a mage. Although in truth, it's not so much me capturing moments in time as moments in time that have captured me. Well, don't just stand there. Go complete the task that the great mage has assigned. And remember, I don't want to see anything dull and dreary. I need photos that are bursting with life, so I can capture the soul and character of the subject. Don't be thinking that carving a statue is just about shapes and proportions. The most important thing is to capture the spirit of the subject in the moment the photograph is taken. All right, got all that?
Quick as a flash! On my mark!
Stay back!
Yeah! Hi! Yeah! Oof! Hi!
Gonna open it later.
Hey, look over there! Are those benches? Oh, they look pretty lively, don't they? Seems like a good first photo. Let's see. Where should we go for the next photo? Oh, we saw a squirrel statue earlier, didn't we? Do you think Nicole likes squirrels? Let's snap a few photos to take back.
Kapow! Oh! Time to roll!
Is that a mandragora? Paimon thinks that would make a pretty fun statue.
Running late again. Ooh. Ooh. Did that grow out of the ground? Time to roll! Gotta steer clear of other people.
Some of these shots are pretty good, but you didn't get any from the front. Let's wait for it to turn around. Yes! That's the one! That's the money shot! Ah! Help! Oh, that was scary. Paimon wasn't expecting it to jump us like that. Go on, Traveler. You got this.
Start the clock!
Stay back! Okay!
Hero incoming! By my spark, the night burns! Too strong! Hero incoming! Yeah! Kapow! It's justice o'clock! Let's move!
You're not going anywhere.
I never...
Leave it to me! The story has only just begun.
Kapow! Charge!
Whew. That should do it. Paimon's kept all the pictures safe. Let's go back to see Nicole.
Running late again.
Hey, Nicole. We're back.
That was quick. You two worked very fast.
It's nothing. But, how do we get the photos to you?
You can hold on to them for now. I'll be there in a couple of days. We can talk more about the statues then.
Sure thing. See you in a couple days.
Boxes. Cool stuff. Hey, Nicole. Always open back.
Just who I wanted to see. I'm delighted with the photos you took. Excellent source material. Now, I have all the carving tools ready to go. Would you like to try it together?
Carving tools? You mean these blocks?
That's right. The statues are inside the stones. All we need to do is remove any excess material. To make things a little easier for you, I've provided a guide on how the carving process works. Allow me to demonstrate. First, we make some big, bold cuts to carve out the general shape. The numbers on the stones represent the amount of material you need to keep in a given column. So, first we do this, and then this.
Oh, it's starting to take shape!
Got it? If you carve the blocks this way, you should be able to see the basic form. Then, you just need to add some finishing touches, and voila.
Good luck.
Wait, what? It suddenly changed in the blink of an eye! How'd you do that?
A great mage doesn't reveal her secrets that easily. Just behold and be amazed. You got the basic carving process down, yes? Focus on that and leave the finishing touches to me. Much obliged.
Alright, let's give this a shot! What the? This is way more difficult than the one you walked us through!
Oh, sorry, wrong one. That's the one I was going to work on. Yours is over here.
Whew, well that's a relief. Let's go! Do you still remember Nicole's process? The numbers represent the amount that we need to keep per column. So, if the number is 0, that means we gotta remove the whole thing. And if it says 3, that means we just mark the whole thing as keep, right? Now, we just need Nicole to add the finishing touches.
You got rid of all the extraneous stone, yes? Let me take a look.
That's one big squirrel.
It's done! Oh, it's the Mage's Lodge! When did that get there?
Is this the power of a mage? The young visitor's voice was filled with wonder. I am truly amazed.
Aha! Finally, the story continues. So, what happened to the mage and her young visitor?
They lived happily ever after.
Dude.
The end.
Dude!
Huh?
What about the brothers?
Tough customers, huh? Well, if you're that eager to hear it, I suppose I'll take it from the top. All my heart desires now is to make your wishes mine, said the young woman. Those words won her the full attention of the great mage, Nicola Coco. But just as they had started warming up to one another, a group of uninvited guests stormed in, seized the mage, and absconded with her.
What?
As the youngster stood there in shock, a new mage by the name of Alinus appeared. She signed a contract with the youngster, bestowing the power of magic upon them. But after making it through a grueling training program, they would come to discover another conspiracy operating in the background. As it turned out, the great mage Nicola Coco was an alien entity. Her true identity was the first daughter of King Meowtress, the third of Planet Meow. She had come disguised as a mage as part of a secret plot to trick the entire world into worshipping Planet Meow. Oh, great mage! Have you been lying to me all this while? The youngster's voice trembled as their heart began to break. Leave me. War is destined to break out between our planet and yours. We were foes from the very start. The mage turned her face away, refusing to let anyone see the tears welling up in her eyes. But the youngster bravely reached out and grabbed her by the arm, swearing to never leave her. Moved by this display of passion, the mage decided to rebel. But in that moment, Alinus, who had once aided the youngster, now took the side of the king. Alinus had been Meowtress III's second daughter all along. She had only helped the youngster in the hopes that her sister might be incited to treason, thus giving her the chance to usurp Nicola's place in the line of succession. Anyway, that's the gist of it. In the end, the youngster, who by this point had turned into a cat, worked with the mage to successfully foil the king's plot. Then, they returned to the mage's lodge together and lived happily ever after in peace and quiet. The end.
That was amazing! This story has everything! True love, rebellion against injustice.
Yep.
That can't be helped. All creations escape the controlling grasp of their creator eventually. We angels are a case in point. Once, we were tasked with guiding human beings, but because some of us chose a different path, our entire race was punished. If even the heavenly principles can't fully control their own creations, what chance do I stand? Fate is always ineffable, and yet, I still hope I can guide those I meet towards a happy ending to their tale. That applies to characters in my stories as well. Anyway, the story's over now, and I'm running a little low on energy. Next time I've got a good story to tell, I'll share it with you, all right?
Yay! Yay!
Wayne. Smash and grab! There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood. My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, take a deep breath, and wolf it down in one go. That way, I get to eat. There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
Let the youngins choose their own path in life,
Including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Let the youngins choose their own path in life,
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Try some.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life,
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life,
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
Better
If the
to
kids
just
come
let
over
the
again
youngins
today,
choose their
I
own
think I'll give
path
them these
in life,
toys.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life,
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else. Come, try some.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, take a deep breath, and wolf it down.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare northern varieties you won't find anywhere else. Try some.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Extra, extra! Read all about it!
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right.
Over again today,
But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life.
if the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, take a deep breath,
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right.
Better to just
Most
let the
importantly,
youngins choose their own path in
you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
varieties you won't find anywhere else. Come, try some.
Better to just
Strength
let
is
the
one of those
youngins
things
choose
where you
their
gotta
own
use it or lose it. So,
If the kids come
wanna
over
train with
again
me
today,
sometime?
I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down,
I think I'll give them these toys.
take a deep breath, and wolf it down in one go. That way, I get to eat my fill without wasting too much time.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Varieties you won't find anywhere else.
just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
The kids come over again today. I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the
My
youngins
parents
choose
always
their
say,
own path in life.
no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down.
Better to just let the
The kids come over again today. I think I'll give them these toys.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
The kids come over again today. I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose
kids
their
There's a
own
lot
path
that
in
goes
life.
into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
Better to just
I'll
let
give
the
them these
youngins
toys.
choose their own path in life, huh?
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down,
The kids come over again today.
take a deep breath,
I think I'll give them these toys.
and wolf it down in one go. That way, I get to eat my fill without wasting too much time.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
Better to just let the youngins choose
The
their
kids
own
come
path.
over again today. I think I'll give them these toys.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down. Take a deep breath.
Better to just let the youngins
If the
choose
kids
their
come
own
over
path
again
in
today,
life, huh?
I think I'll give them these toys.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most
Better to
importantly,
just let the youngins choose
you have to
their
keep the
own
fruit in a
path
good
in
mood.
life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Read all about it. Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including
Better to just let the
If
youngins
the kids
choose
come
their
over
own
again
path
today,
in life,
I think I'll give them these toys.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down. Take a deep.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else.
Better to just let the youngins choose their
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else. Try some.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
Read all about it.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly,
Let the youngins choose their
you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path.
Brother.
Kids come over again today. I think I'll give them these toys.
My parents always say,
What?
no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down. Take it easy.
Oh.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the young ones choose their own path in life, huh?
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life.
Fruits from every corner of Tibet, including rare Northland varieties you won't find anywhere else. Come, try some.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life, huh?
Read all about it.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
Better to just let the youngins
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys. Kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down.
Over again today, I
Take a
think
deep
I'll give
breath.
them these toys.
better to just let the youngins choose their own path in life.
kids come over again today. I think I'll give them these toys.
There's a lot that goes into managing an orchard. Watering, weeding, fertilizing the soil, making sure the temperature is right. But most importantly, you have to keep the fruit in a good mood.
If the kids come over again today, I think I'll give them these toys.
Мизуки да Мизуки. I can't even respond to him. He left the chat way too early. That shaker. Well, it is beautiful and fits her.
Strength is one of those things where you gotta use it or lose it. So, wanna train with me sometime?
Okay, well. Yes. Renew Portable power saw. Does she heal herself?
My parents always say, no matter how busy life gets, you should always sit down and enjoy a proper meal when you get hungry. What I like to do is stack my plate up high, then squash it all down, take a deep breath, and wolf it down in one go. That way, I get to eat...
I think that's Vita.
Better to just let the youngins choose their own path.
Dear. Well, if he doesn't add me, then I'm gonna forget who he is.
Прообещал бомбежки за казни. И тот уже успел заявить репортерам, что его это вроде как устраивает. Источники Нью-Йорк Таймс в Пентагоне говорят, что там готовятся вернуть солдат на базу в Катаре. Правда, ровно те же источники сообщили, что Америка действительно подготовила бомбардировщики для ударов, из чего можно сделать вывод, что изначально Трамп не блефовал и действительно был готов бомбить. Блефует ли он сейчас в другую сторону, еще узнаем. Дальше скажем про старый новый интерес Трампа, Гренландию. Но сначала небольшая реклама. Посмотрите, пожалуйста. Теперь про старый новый интерес Трампа – Гренландию. Дискуссии о присоединении ее к США заново запустились после успешной операции в Венесуэле. Сначала об острове вспомнили советники Трампа в соцсетях, а потом уже и президент поддержал свою же идею годовой давности. Гренландия, говорит, должна быть американской. Сейчас Гренландия – автономная территория в составе Дании. Живет там 50 тысяч человек, а находится остров на стратегически важной позиции, на севере Атлантики, где проходят морские пути к России и Арктической Канаде. У самих гренландцев есть движение за независимость, но вот движения за присоединение к Америке не было и нет. Впрочем, Трамп это волнует в первую с конца очередь. В вопросе Гренландии Трамп с товарищами вспомнили о второй части концепции кнута и пряника. Телеканал NBC сообщает, что в Белом доме планируют предложить Дании взять Гренландию и просто продать. Разработкой плана займется госсекретарь Марко Рубио. По источникам канала за Гренландию собираются предложить $700 миллиардов. Это больше половины годового бюджета Пентагона, который, по идее, будет отвечать за Гренландию. Ведь вся причина интереса к ней именно военная. Трамп утверждает, что Гренландию надо присоединить, потому что если этого не сделает Америка, то сделает Россия или Китай. Поэтому обязательно надо поставить в Гренландии американский флаг и разместить солдат. Разбираться с вопросом Гренландии Трамп отправил своего вице-президента Джей Ди Венса. Тот и так уже ездил в Гренландию несколько месяцев назад с явной целью сагитировать местных за аннексию. Вышло не очень. Вчера же Венс заодно с Рубио встретились с министрами иностранных дел Дании и Гренландии и обсудили, как Америке приобрести Гренландию. Выйдя с переговоров, министры деталей не раскрыли, только нервно закурили и заявили, что разговор был честным, но конструктивным. На языке дипломатов это означает, что все переругались. Позиция Дании и Гренландии не поменялась. Никакой продажи острова не хотят ни там, ни там. Гренландский премьер пару дней назад прямым текстом сказал: если уж выбирать между Данией и США, то мы выбираем Данию. Спасибо и отстаньте. Вообще, кстати, прецедент продажи датской территории Америки уже есть, просто очень давний. В 1916-м американцы купили у Дании ее карибские владения, острова, которые теперь называются американскими Виргинскими. Но был-то это 100 лет назад. Тогда и границы стран были более подвижными, и продавать территории, не спрашивая местных жителей, было нормой. А самое главное, в том договоре о продаже американцы черным по белому расписались в том, что не имеют никаких претензий как раз на Гренландию. Признали ее датской территорией. Впрочем, вряд ли Трампа волнуют какие-то там документы, которые США когда-то там подписывали. Это все вторично. Звучит жутко, конечно, но если остров так и не решатся продать, Трамп может попробовать забрать его силой. В его администрации перечить ему никто не станет. Такой крамолы за подчиненными Трампа больше не наблюдается. Но вот за пределами круга, в том числе среди других американских политиков, этот вариант вызывает ужас. Дания, включая Гренландию, член НАТО. Датчане отправляли войска на американские войны в Афганистане и в Ираке. В этих войнах погибли 52 датских солдата. В самой Гренландии и так уже стоит американская военная база, и у Америки есть право построить еще, как раньше, во времена Холодной войны. Никаких сомнений в союзничестве Дании и США никогда не возникало, поэтому любые мысли о военном захвате Гренландии звучат пугающе. В связи с этим в Конгресс внесли закон, прямо запрещающий любые военные действия против союзников по НАТО, то есть Дании и Гренландии. Спонсируют этот закон как демократы, так и республиканцы, но шансы, что его в итоге примут, близки к нулю. Администрация Трампа тем временем продолжает обработку населения. Официальный аккаунт Белого дома запостил в Твиттер мем с Гренландии на перепутье. Слева Америка, справа Россия и Китай. И подписью «Куда пойдешь, гренландец?». Сама Гренландия там в виде 2 собачьих упряжек. Это стёб, который начал лично Трамп. Ему кто-то сказал, что в Гренландии военные ездят на упряжках. Тот решил, что это супер смешно, и теперь повторяет этот факт в каждом интервью про Гренландию. Подтягиваются и другие члены администрации. Министр внутренних дел Дуг Бёргам запостил карту США с Гренландией и подписью «Наши новые просторы». Такое поведение вызывает возмущение не только у датчан, а у всех европейцев. Франция, Германия, Швеция и Британия уже выразили поддержку делом. В Гренландии приземлились самолеты с солдатами этих стран, прилетевшими на срочное учение. Однако шаг этот все равно символический. Солдат отправили пару десятков из каждой страны. Что будет дальше, зависит только от пожеланий самого Трампа. Но в Европе угрозу воспринимают всерьез. Глава дипломатии Евросоюза Кая Каллас на встрече с европейскими депутатами уже пошутила, что если кто не пьет, то самое время начинать. Хотя все внимание Трампа и его администрации обращено на Иран и Гренландию, вряд ли они забыли о своих ближайших соседях в Латинской Америке. Про старого врага Кубу и то ли друга, то ли врага Мексику. Все это повторение существовавшей в 19 и 20 веках доктрины Монро, которой руководствовались США в своей внешней политике. Доктрина заключалась в том, что западное полушарие – это американская зона влияния. США будут там делать, что захотят, а всем остальным надо свалить. Сам Трамп про доктрину в курсе и уже придумал назвать ее доктриной Данро. В честь себя, конечно же. Начать действовать по доктрине Данро решили, очевидно, с Венесуэлы, где после захвата Мадуро не происходит особенно ничего. Никаких ударов американцы не наносили, солдат их там нет, режим стоит на месте. Вчера Трамп вообще созвонился с новым лидером Венесуэлы, в Рио президента Делси Родригес, заместительницей арестованного Мадуро, и разговор Трампу понравился. В соцсетях он написал, что Родригес прекрасный человек и что теперь у США с Венесуэлой будет великолепное партнерство. Это чуть-чуть отличается от предыдущих заявлений Трампа про то, что руководить Венесуэлой теперь будет он сам. Похоже, Трамп имел в виду, что просто будет сотрудничать с венесуэльскими властями на его условиях. По одному из них Америка получит венесуэльскую нефть, на которой держится экономика страны. Представитель Белого дома сообщил, что США уже запустили продажи венесуэльской нефти, и первая сделка составила $500 миллионов. При этом нет никаких деталей о том, кому вообще пойдут эти деньги. Америке, Венесуэле, нефтяным компаниям, лично Трампу или кому-то еще. Тем временем попытки Конгресса хоть как-то контролировать Трампа предсказуемо завершились ничем. Именно этот орган в Америке, по идее, занимается вопросами войны и мира. Президент верховный главнокомандующий и руководит войсками, но Конгресс, если захочет, может сказать ему: «Все, давай сворачивайся». Правда, для этого надо провести через обе палаты резолюцию, что в очередной раз не вышло. Демократы внесли такую ограничивающую резолюцию по Венесуэле, и некоторые республиканцы изначально даже ее поддержали. Но потом с ними пообщались из Белого дома, и резолюция в итоге не прошла. Проголосовали 50 на 50, а в таких случаях вице-президент вносит решающий голос. Обоснование следующее. Почему не поддержали? А мы уже все сделали в Венесуэле, солдат наших там нет, так что и голосовать не о чем. Правда, проваленная резолюция означает, что Трамп может и дальше делать, что захочет. Например, выкрасть и новую президентку, если следующий разговор с ней ему уже не так понравится. Госсекретарь Марко Рубио тем временем заявил, что США отправляют гуманитарную помощь Кубе, где прошел сильный ураган. И не забыл отметить, что помощь идет народу, а не нелегитимному режиму. Рубио известный ястреб в вопросах отношений с Кубой. И именно он главная сила, подталкивающая Трампа к столкновению с островом. Трамп, похоже, поддается. В субботу он пригрозил Кубе, что если та не заключит с Америкой некую сделку, то на остров больше не пойдут ни нефть, ни деньги. В чем заключается угроза, сразу не ясно, ведь Соединенные Штаты и так много десятилетий держат против Кубы торговое эмбарго. Возможно, речь идет о венесуэльской нефти. Дело в том, что у Кубы и у Венесуэлы, двух левых диктатур, давно сложились хорошие отношения, и Куба во многом полагалась на венесуэльскую нефть. Теперь, когда Трамп давит на новую венесуэльскую президентку, поток нефти может остановиться. Ну и, наконец, остается Мексика. Давний козел отпущения для Трампа, который сваливает на нее примерно все проблемы Америки. После ударов по Венесуэле Трамп говорил, что может ударить и по Мексике. Не по правительству, а по наркокартелям, которые там оперируют. Такие идеи, естественно, мексиканскому правительству не нравятся. И 3 дня назад президентка Мексики Клаудия Шайнбаум позвонила Трампу с просьбой пояснить за базар. Здесь Мексику, возможно, спасает то, что Трампу, похоже, лично Шайнбаум нравится. Поэтому риторика у него менее воинственная. Трамп в разговоре предложил ей помощь с картелями, но та отказалась, сказав, что разберутся сами. Мексика, в отличие от Венесуэлы, сама с США враждовать не пытается. Проблемы с наркотиками старается решать, и американские просьбы в этом вопросе в основном выполняет. Помимо этого, Мексика – важнейший торговый партнер США. На троих с Канадой у них соглашение о свободной торговле. Куча людей вдоль границы работают в соседней стране. Ну и культурные связи прочнейшие. Поэтому как раз вот здесь разговоры Трампа о том, как они разбомбят картели, скорее всего, до дела не дойдут. Примерно так выглядит список вещей, которые с Нового года интересуют Дональда Трампа. Есть ощущение, что внутреннюю политику он пока что оставил своим министрам и другим назначенцам. Трамп увидел, что в вопросах войны и внешней политики ему особо никто не противостоит. А значит, поэтому сбавлять обороты он и не собирается. Интересно, видимо, ему все это. При этом, куда его внимание обратиться дальше, предсказать практически невозможно. Сегодня вот, например, Трамп снова напал на Зеленского и сказал, что тот мешает заключить сделку и остановить российско-украинскую войну. Фокус внимания скачет без остановки от Венесуэлы до Ирана, до Украины и через НАТО с Гренландии до Кубы. Про Канаду только пока забыл. Нам с вами остается только наблюдать и читать сообщения новостных агентств в 3 часа ночи, когда в Вашингтоне просыпается президент. До завтра.
Ultimatum protocol.
With the marrow of the troops in my hand, behold the false lords fall.
Looks like this place is completely useless.
The night sky dips once more.
Installation chamber deployed.
To me. Excellent. You barely managed to touch my level.
The show begins!
Cleanup sequence initiated.
Did you honestly think that would hit?
Yeah. Annihilation mode. Defensive mode engaged.
Come on, the graveyard.
How dull.
Okay.
English looks like this, but it used to look like this.
Can we make tape measures awesome, actually? So, what I want to do is kind of a tape measure that shoots the tape, and then we can reel it back like a fishing pole. We need to figure out what kind of mechanism work and also how do they work, because I don't really know. I have an idea, but let's open one up and see if we can reverse the action. As simple as that, you know what I'm saying? I got the perfect tool for it from Jaco. Thank you very much. Oh no.
There's a lot of
Okay,
managing
easy does it. We have a spring inside, and we have the tape measure that wants to unwind, which is interesting because that means it will open up like a reverse spring. Oh my god! Crap. Let's try the big one. So, let's put this back. Alright, and then gonna, it's all under control, and now once we release it, hopefully this goes fast enough that it doesn't smoosh inside and stops it. So
Wanna train with me sometime?
let's go. Yeah, it's okay, it stopped a little bit, but one. Look at what you made me do. Look at what you made me do. But it's looking promising. Then we need to wind everything back. Okay, so let's make our own prototype version number 1 and see if we can make it work. First we need to make our own spool to hold the tape measure.
So let's make it 35 millimeters and extrude that by 2. Seems about the right thickness. Delicious. Then we need the core of the spool to be 20 millimeters. Extrude that to 19.5 millimeters, which just about thick enough to hold the tape measure in between. Close it all off with another 35 millimeter diameter disc. Make a through hole in the middle to fit the axle of the tape measure, and we're good to go to make it out of delicious brass on the lathe.
Denuvo. Fine. Denuvo is an infamous DRM solution used in games. Technically it is a DRM for DRMs, the idea being a developer would use it to protect other DRM solutions like Steam or Origin, providing a defense in depth with sophisticated anti-tamper techniques. Let's set some expectations up early. This will not be a full crack. The game in question will not run. However, we will uncover all the tricks this particular version of Denuvo uses and write a crack that bypasses the initial checks. I'll get into what this actually means later, but essentially we'll be solving the fun part, and then everything after that will just be grinding out more of the same. This video is the culmination of 3 months worth of work, the largest project I've ever worked on. Normally when I look at DRM, I try not to look too much at prior art, as the fun is in the discovery. However, for this I did do a lot of research as part of it, and I'll link all the resources down below. So what game was the subject of my 3 months of misery? The classic Formula 1 2016.
Welcome to Formula 1.
I chose this game for several reasons. It's an unlisted game, so there's no impact to sales. There's already a crack for it, so I'm not changing the status quo, and it uses an early version of Denuvo. On that last point, it means that nothing I do will affect modern games. The techniques I show here have all been fixed on modern versions of Denuvo, but the fundamentals of how it works remains largely the same. Also, looking at early versions makes it easier for me. Not easy, just easier. Okay, there's a lot to get through, so let's start with how Denuvo works and what our end goal is. The fundamental technique Denuvo uses is well known. In fact, it's in the original patent. When you want to protect a function with Denuvo, it selects certain constants from the assembly. It then takes these out of the code and stores them on the Denuvo servers. When the game starts, it collects a bunch of information about the hardware it's on, the hardware IDs. These are then sent to the server.
The server takes the constants for the game you're running and encrypts them with a key derived from the hardware IDs. It sends this blob of encrypted constants back to your machine, and this is known as the token file. At runtime, the game will decrypt the constants using the hardware IDs. The idea being that if you've copied the game and token file to a different machine, then the constants will decrypt to different values, due to the hardware being different. At this point, the game will likely crash. This diagram certainly clears things up. But what happens if you make a legitimate change to your hardware? Well, there's a provision made for this at the start of the game. Denuvo will do a check against all the hardware IDs and see if they match the token file. If not, then it will delete the token file and request a new one. And it is this check that is the focus of our project. If we can bypass this check, then we know we've identified all the hardware IDs the game uses. The game itself will have many checks, but they will all be based on those initial checks. So the game is to identify what information Denuvo wants and feed it to that so it thinks the token file is valid for the current machine, even though we'll generate the token file on a different PC. Of course, it's not as simple as that. Denuvo has a bunch of anti-tamper checks that prevent us from easily patching the code. There's 3 components to this project. 1, the Denuvo hardware ID checks, which actually check the machine is associated with the token. 2, the anti-tamper checks, which continually verify if the code has been tampered with. And 3, the virtualization layer, which obfuscates all the code. We'll need to dive through and handle each of those layers in order to influence the game as it's running. We can use a tool called Detect It Easy to get some information about the game. We can see here it's using Denuvo version 2 with Steam, and the S data section of the binary is packed, i.e. obfuscated. So given just this information, we can make some inferences. The first is that the S data section is probably going to contain the important code we want as it's protected. In fact, looking at it in Ghidra, we can see that the rest of it is just garbage. The second takeaway requires a bit of research on Denuvo, but it's quite easy to find out that games with this version use another third-party tool called VM Protect, or VMP, to obfuscate their code. Future versions of Denuvo replace this with their own custom virtualization layer. But what is virtualization, and what misery does it entail for us? Essentially, virtualization is a technique to obfuscate what code does. You start by defining an architecture for a custom CPU, complete with a custom instruction set. Usually this is a stack-based RISC architecture, but the details can be as ambitious as you want. Next, you build up tooling that takes a regular function in your compiled game, in x86 assembly, and transpiles that to your virtual architecture. You then embed into the game an interpreter that will convert the custom architecture into native code. Finally, you rewire everything so that your original function is replaced and instead runs through the VM. This is a pain to reverse engineer, as you have to fully reverse the custom architecture as well as the virtual machine implementation before you can even start to understand what the purpose of a function is. So let's do that. Actually, before we do that, we have a minor side quest to embark on, the packed S data section where all our VMP code is going to reside. I have neither the time nor the patience to figure out how this is packed, so I've just run the game and dumped it after it's finished unpacking. This gives me enough of the binary to load into Ghidra so I can start looking around. The version of VMP used is VMP2, and to be clear, I've not reversed this myself. The back engineering group have done that and written up quite a detailed explanation on it, as well as some tooling. However, for my own understanding, I did ignore their tooling and build my own. This kind of DRM analysis is all about building custom tooling, so let's go through all that. The VMP2 virtual machine is quite simple. It has a virtual instruction pointer, which is always the native register RSI. It has a virtual stack pointer, which is always the native register RBP. And it has some virtual registers, which are always an offset from the native register RDI. Then there are a bunch of instructions the VM can execute. I won't enumerate them all, but they're what you would probably expect. Reading from memory, writing to memory, maths operations, and calling functions. As I mentioned before, this is all stack-based. If we look at the add instruction, we see it adds 2 values together on the virtual stack and writes the result back to the virtual stack. The Denuvo code will largely be executed via this VM, so we need to start to break it down and build some tooling around it. There are 3 components to this machinery we need to find to recover a protected function. The handlers. These are the native assembly instructions which execute the virtual opcodes. The handler table, an array of all the handlers needed for a specific run through the VM. The VM instructions. These define the execution through the VM and consist of an index into the handler table and optional arguments. At a high level, when a VMP2 protected function is executed, it will save off all the registers, then set up the VM state, which includes resolving virtual instruction pointer from a constant push to the native stack and points to the virtual instructions. It will then progress through the instructions, executing handlers until the function logic is complete. At this point, it will then restore all the native registers. Sounds like a lot? Well, as an added bonus, the table and the instructions are encrypted and all the handlers are obfuscated. Let's keep breaking this down. There's a special opcode called VM entry that all protected functions execute first. This saves off the native registers and sets up the VM, which includes loading the address of the handler table. It does this with the load effective address R12 native instruction, which is quite easy to search for. So this gives us all the VM entry handlers in the binary as well as the handler tables. However, things start getting tricky here. We can't just manually read through the assembly to find the rest of the code, as VMP employs two irritating obfuscation techniques. The first, and most obvious from looking at it, is the jump obfuscation. Basically, VMP has taken all their functions, split it up into small chunks, and stitched them together with jump instructions. This means you cannot see a linear progression of the code, and it completely breaks Ghidra's decompiler. As an added annoyance, these jumps interleave with other obfuscated functions, so all the code is just one blob of jumps. Also, some of these jumps are conditional and have duplicates, so there's multiple paths through the obfuscated code. The next technique is dead store obfuscation. This just adds loads of junk instructions between the legit ones. They're all valid x86 instructions, so won't cause a crash if executed, but they change state unused by the VM. Effectively, they add a lot of noise to the analysis. We can heuristically remove both of these. I've created a basic app that can read in the game and pass out the sections and provides a good starting point. First of all, we use libcapstone, a disassembly library, to pass out the instructions the game is executing. From there we can emulate the code by stepping through each instruction. Despite there being multiple paths through the code, all roads lead to Rome, so we just follow the jumps and record the instructions between them. This will then give us a flattened path through the code. For the dead store obfuscation, we mark each instruction as whether it is a read or write to its register argument. We then walk forward until we find another usage of that register. We only care about the last write in this chain before a read. Any other writes are dead stores and can be removed. By applying this heuristic over and over, we can slowly remove the instructions that don't affect the final execution, and we're left with something like this. Okay, so we can find the array of handlers, but the table is encrypted. The encryption isn't too difficult to revert. In our cleaned up VM entry code, if we look forward from where it loads the handler table, it will eventually load the first index to execute into either RCX or RDX with this instruction. From here we walk forward again until there's another operation on that register, which is the decryption operation. Luckily in this case the decryption is just done with a single instruction, so I've knocked up all these in the code. They're simple things like XOR, NOT, byte rotate, etc. As the same operation is applied to every entry, we can now fully recover the table. Okay, so now we know the address of all the handlers in the binary, but we don't know what those handlers do. Now comes the real grind. The article details the native instructions each handler uses, which, since we've cleaned up the handlers, we can easily pattern match against. So I spent some time and added pattern matches for all the handlers, including a couple that weren't mentioned in the article. A bit more forward engineering and tidying up, and we can dump all the handlers to a JSON file. If we want to understand what these are actually doing, we really need to be able to emulate the VM. Conceptually, this isn't too complex. Just implement all the opcodes and set up a stack and some virtual registers. However, as always, the devil is in the detail. The virtual instructions can be located by looking for the first real instruction in the VM entry which pushes the address of the instructions to the stack. Obviously this is encrypted, but VMP2 uses 3 of the same encryption primitives we saw earlier, so it's easy enough to decrypt. The problem now is figuring out which opcodes are executed. Although we have the address to the instructions, the individual instructions are themselves encrypted. And it's not just a simple transformation this time, it's a rolling encryption, meaning the result of decrypting each instruction feeds into the decryption of the next. Couple this with the fact that the virtual instruction pointer can move both forward and backwards, and we have an all or nothing situation. We need to be able to fully emulate the VM in order to get all the opcodes, and there are 20 handler tables in the game. I started building out this emulator, but it was a lot of work. I was a month into this project and I hadn't even gotten to the de novo bit yet. However, there's a key observation that allows me to break through the VMP2 and continue making progress. The VMP2 instruction set is, by design, quite limited, which means there's certain operations that cannot be executed in the VM. There's a great blog post by a chap called Connor which covers the high-level details of de novo, including some of the known hardware IDs. One of the most iconic ones is the x86 instruction CPU ID. This instruction returns various bits of information about the CPU and is hard-coded in the silicon, so hard to spoof. But the VM doesn't have a CPU ID opcode, so it has to do a full VM exit before executing this instruction. So we can use this info we found so far to find some of these. This is a good starting point, however Denuvo has more tricks up its sleeve, so we know it won't be this easy. We need to start exerting some control over the game, and the easiest way to do that is with DLL hijacking. Basically, we can look at all the libraries the game loads at startup and find one which doesn't expose a lot of functions. We can then write our own library with the same name and exports and drop that into the game directory. A nice property of Windows is that it will find our library and load it first before it starts looking in the system files. So I've created a new dinput8.dll and made it the same shape as the real one. If we add a special function called DLL main, then Windows will also execute this when it loads the library. So if we add some simple login code, we can see we get loaded and executed. The nice thing about this technique is that our code gets executed right at the start of the executable's lifetime, so we can use DLL main to do some interesting things before the Denuvo code is even run. We'll need to hook some native Windows functions, and the easiest way to do that is with the import address table, or IAT. This is an array of function pointers where each entry is the actual address of an imported function. So doing some Windows PE parsing, we can resolve the offsets into each function and overwrite that with a pointer to our custom function. If we make the hooked function the same shape as the original and keep a copy of the original, then we can create a simple hooking framework. There's one more bit of machinery we need to set up, a vectored exception handler, or VEH. In Windows land, all exceptions are handled by the kernel, and this includes access violations and other low-level errors. The thing is though, Windows allows us to register a custom handler for these, so we can provide custom handler or recovery logic when they occur. It gives us incredibly powerful access over the executable. We can even change the values in the registers before optionally continuing execution. Okay, let's take a look at some of the CPU ID instructions we already found. As CPU ID will give a different value per machine, we want to make it such that it will always give a consistent value, and the easiest way to do that is with patching. We could overwrite the instruction with a jump to some custom code, but a CPU ID instruction is only 2 bytes, and a jump will be more than that, so we'd have to save off the overwritten bytes and do some bookkeeping. In this case, it's much easier to overwrite the CPU ID instruction with the UD2 instruction. This is a special 2-byte undefined instruction which will always generate an invalid opcode error. On Windows, this will get raised as an exception, which we can then write a custom handler for. In our handler, we can update the instruction pointer to any code we want and get Windows to resume the application, therefore redirecting execution to our own code. Sadly, in Denuvo land, things are rarely this straightforward. If we try doing this, then the game crashes. What Denuvo is doing under the hood is monitoring its own code, constantly calculating CRCs to see if it's been patched. If it detects a patch, it dies. Now your first instinct might be to reverse engineer the CRC checks in order to be able to bypass them. However, this is not a trivial task. The checksums being calculated will be complicated and be executed via VMP. There is, however, another way. At the lowest level, pages of memory have a protection level that is enforced by the CPU. A page can be readable, writable, or executable, or some combination of the three. If you try and read from a non-readable page, then the CPU will raise an error that we can handle with our VEH. So normally code will be readable and executable, which makes sense as this allows the code to run, but also the code to read itself to calculate the checksums. Now we can change the protection of a page in Windows with a function called virtual protect. So if we change the protection from read executable to read only, then when it is executed, we can capture the access violation exception. At the start of our library in DLL main, we can copy over all the code into a shadow section, which we are free to modify as we want. Then we mark the page the CPU ID is in as read only. When the game tries to actually run the code, our handler will be called. We can then change the instruction pointer to redirect execution to our shadow section, which will have all the CPU ID patches already in place. In essence, reads will happen as they always have from the real code, but execution will be silently redirected to the shadow code, where we can make whatever changes we want. Of course this doesn't work. Even after wiring up all this boilerplate, the access violation is never triggered, which means we never redirect to the shadow code. By hooking and logging virtual protect, we can see that the game continuously resets the protection of the pages it cares about, thereby undoing our little trick. So we need to add some logic to our hooked virtual protect, which prevents the pages from changing whilst reporting to the legit calling code that it was changed. The same goes for virtual query, which the game can use to check for the current protection level of any page. And this works nicely. We can see the access violation and then our hooks being called. I've kept using the UD2 trick for patching for simplicity, although it does have a performance overhead. We now need to find all the CPU ID instructions. Spoiler alert, there's more than just these that happen on VM exit. Let's talk about pin. PIN is a tool by Intel for dynamic binary instrumentation. It enables the injection of arbitrary code into an executable via a custom JIT engine. It hijacks the instruction pointer, saves register state, and translates the program's binary code into a new stream of instructions on the fly. As it's fully programmable, we can do interesting things like log specific instructions like executed, say CPU ID. In line with the universal truth that as software gets more complicated, it gets more complicated to build, I bashed my head against their limited instructions for several hours to build a custom plugin. And we can trace CPU ID instruction execution. Pay close attention to ones like this. The address is very interesting as it's not from the game code, but a heap allocation. If we wrangle our debugger, we can see that this gets reified as this. So somewhere in the bowels of Denuvo, probably via VMP, it's jitting custom CPU ID checks. Great. Pages of memory can be allocated with virtual alloc, so by hooking this and carefully logging, we can work out that all the jitted code comes from this massive allocation here. One of the arguments for virtual alloc specifies the protection, so in our hook, we can wait for this large allocation and then silently switch out the protection for read-only. Then we can cache execution of this region with our VEH. Of course, we can't know when the jitted code gets emitted, so we just wait for the game to try and execute it, and then we recreate the new shadow region with CPU ID patches every time. We also need to make sure the game doesn't try and change the protection back. Small side quest now, but we need to create some machinery to capture the hardware IDs when run on another machine. This is just a struct with the data we want to store. When the library is loaded, it checks for the presence of a hardware IDs file. If it's not there, then it enters record mode, fills out that struct, writes it to a file, and then continues. If the file is there, then it enters replay mode and fills that struct from the file before continuing. If we replay the CPU IDs from another machine, then we get this pop-up. As I said in the beginning, there is already a crack for this game, however it works differently to what we're doing. Instead of patching out the hardware ID checks, it instead generates a legit token file for the current machine, so we can leverage that for testing. Let's copy the Denuvo token file over from another machine. If we try and run the game, we get this pop-up. This means that the initial checks have failed and the game wants a new token file. In fact, it even deletes the old one. As a reminder, our goal is not to get to the game, but to get past this pop-up. Replaying our CPU ID values from the other machine, we still get the pop-up. This means that there are other checks going on. The fun thing about Denuvo is that it's an all or nothing solution. We either get all the hardware IDs, or we fail.
What?
The next thing Denuvo does is read data from the headers of system DLLs. This makes sense as they will be subtly different between each version of Windows and can therefore be used as a way of identifying the system. Passing the pin and my own log
Copyright in the UK lasts for quite a long time, usually something like 70 years. It varies depending on what kind of work you're talking about, but eventually every artistic work will leave copyright and enter the public domain, at which point it can be freely used by anyone. And there are a few special exceptions where the normal rules don't apply, but mostly they're really old things that have something to do with like the royal family. For example, the King James Bible is permanently owned and controlled by the royal family in Britain. But I was told by one of you recently, someone called Pierce, got in touch and told me that there is one example of a more recent work that has been given special treatment under the law, and that is Peter Pan, specifically the original play from 1904, which, even though it's well past its sell-by date in terms of copyright, if you want to perform or adapt that play in the UK today, you will still have to pay royalties on it, and you always will, unless there is a change in the law. I'm in Kensington Gardens in London, by the way, which, if you know your Peter Pan lore, is where he grew up, and there is a statue of Peter Pan just over there, which was put there by his creator, J.M. Barrie. Fun fact, J.M. Barrie also wrote another play called Quality Street, which for some reason later gave its name to a line of chocolates. And if you look at the packaging for Quality Street chocolates, you will see a little illustration of the two main characters from that play. Kind of weird. Anyway, Peter Pan was a big hit both in Britain and in America. It was a very popular play to put on at Christmas time, not necessarily as a pantomime, but just as a play for families at Christmas. And it made J.M. Barrie a rich and quite famous man. He was made Sir James Barrie in 1913, and he kept on writing, but he never had a hit quite as big as that story about the boy who never grew up. And in keeping with that theme, he became a big supporter of Great Ormond Street Hospital, which was Britain's first, and still today, their flagship hospital for children. They have a history of being supported by writers. One of their earliest fundraisers apparently was Charles Dickens. But J.M. Barrie became a big supporter. He made donations, and in 1929 he was asked to sit on a committee which was going to be responsible for getting a big extension to the hospital built. But he declined and instead promised that he would find another way to help. And 2 months later, the story goes that the hospital received word that J.M. Barrie was gifting them the entire rights to all of his Peter Pan works, something that he was apparently planning to do in his will, but he brought it forward in light of their request. And so Great Ormond Street Hospital, or GOSH as everyone calls them, became, I'm going to guess, the only hospital in the world to control a major creative IP. In 1939, 2 years after James Barrie died, Disney came knocking and they wanted to make a Peter Pan film, so they had to buy the rights to make that film from GOSH. It's not clear how much money the hospital has earned from those rights over the years. Apparently, J.M. Barrie asked them to keep it a secret, but it's probably not enough to bankroll the entire hospital, but enough to make a difference. But copyright is time limited. Eventually, every work enters into the public domain. So it was always expected that at some point, GOSH's income from Peter Pan would end. But due to the work of a few people, that didn't happen. Anyway, quick advert, and then we'll find out why. My audience is of course very English speaking, but I had a look and the second most popular subtitle language on my videos is Spanish. So when one of the world's top language apps, Babbel, got in touch wanting to sponsor a video, I thought this is the perfect time to show off my incredible skills to my Spanish speaking audience.
De semana juegan al tenis.
Excuse me? Anyone who speaks... Uh-oh. Spanish of... I got it. 3 weeks. Bebemos % off your for most of the 20th. Adios. In the UK, the length of copyright for a play for most of the 20th century was set at life plus 50 years, meaning that 50 years after J.M. Barrie died, his work would enter the public domain. That put the deadline at the 31st of December 1987, and it did actually happen. At the end of that year, Peter Pan's copyright did expire, and it did become free for anyone to use. But by sheer coincidence, at the same time, Parliament was debating the Copyright Designs and Patents Bill, which was going to completely rewrite the law on copyright. And by another coincidence, one of the former chairs of Great Ormond Street Hospital was a woman named Audrey Callaghan, and her husband, James Callaghan, was a former Prime Minister and now a member of the House of Lords. So he introduced an amendment which became known as the Peter Pan Clause. And this amendment would not revive the copyright of Peter Pan, but instead it would grant Gosh a permanent right to claim royalties on performances or adaptations of that play. The difference being that they wouldn't have the right to refuse to allow someone to perform or adapt that play, but if someone did, they would have the right to claim royalties. And the debate about this amendment is interesting to read. Most of the lords who are present approved of the idea, but one of the most vocal opponents was Lord Willis, who was a playwright himself, and said that he didn't think it was right that theatres should be asked to subsidise the health service. Other points were raised like, why should we make a special exception just in this one case? Shouldn't we come up with some kind of system or rule that can handle any cases like this going forward? Might we be establishing a precedent without realising it that might cause problems in the future? But in the end, both the government and the opposition agreed that this seemed like a good thing to do. Callaghan pointed out that theatres had been fine paying these royalties for the last 50 years, and he didn't think parents who took their children to see the play would mind too much if some of the proceeds were going towards helping real sick children. So the amendment went into the bill became law, and to this day, if you want to perform or adapt Peter Pan in the UK, you have to pay royalties to Great Ormond Street Hospital. James and Audrey Callaghan, who were ultimately responsible for that amendment, unveiled a statue of Peter Pan outside Gosh in 2000. And 5 years later, when they both died within 11 days of each other, their ashes were scattered in the garden at the base of that statue. I would go and film that statue, but at the moment it's been moved because Gosh is building a new main entrance and a brand new children's cancer centre. And I'm sure the proceeds from the Peter Pan rights are a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of building something like that. But nonetheless, thanks to the work of J.M. Barrie and Audrey and James Callaghan and many others, the story about the boy who never grew up will continue to raise money to help ensure that lots of real-life children do. There is one more person I want to mention though. In 2015, it was found that the law needed a slight update because Gosh was being reorganised and the specific entity that's named in the law was no longer going to exist. So an MP proposed a short bill to just update the law and change that name so it would keep working. And once again, it was agreed to by both the government and the opposition, and it passed into law. But the name of the MP who proposed that bill was Wendy, which is quite funny, isn't it? Anyway, the lake in Kensington Gardens is frozen over. This is not the best time of year to be standing around talking about laws in Kensington Gardens on the cold, frozen grass. But on the upside, I did manage to finish the video before the sun disappeared, which is always good. Nice sunset as well.
Hey, does anyone know what happened to all the toilet paper? I think we ran out.
Oh yeah, I turned it all into vodka. Good luck.
That's right. Today we're doing a reverse Nile Red and turning vodka back into toilet paper. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, before the plague of 2020 and the days of hoarding toilet paper, my friend Nile Red made a video turning a batch of that most sacred of tissue into drinkable moonshine. Insane as this may seem at the outset, it quickly makes sense when you consider the chemistry involved. Cellulose, the main thing paper is made of, is really just long chains of glucose molecules stuck together. If you can break the chains apart and free the glucose, it's very easy to ferment that into alcohol. Glucose, after all, is just sugar. From there, a quick trip through a distillation setup and you've gone from TP to hungover. So how is it possible to go the other direction? One of the things that the cellulose to vodka route has going for it is that there is a readily available organism that will eat the provided glucose and turn it into ethanol, namely yeast. Which means that most of the work is actually breaking up the cellulose into a form the yeast can eat. Well, if we're allowed to use microbes, we actually have a ton of tools at our disposal. To tackle the reverse direction, we're going to need to break it up into two steps. First, we need to convert the ethanol back into a form which can be readily consumed by our microbe of interest. And then, that microbe will use that food and convert it back into cellulose. And while this is obviously a silly use of vodka, we'll see how the same microbes that let us do this might be the future of environmentally friendly paper products and even a few super materials. But before we talk super materials, let's at least manage some passable bog roll. To get started, while some people may be able to survive seemingly on nothing but pure booze, vodka for most creatures is not a highly nutritious food source. But while you might think we need some strange exotic organism to convert it back into food, we can actually just use the same organism that created it in the first place. Again, yeast. Strange as it may seem, yeast are actually quite capable of eating alcohol. If you grow yeast on sugar in an oxygen-free environment, they make alcohol. We call this fermentation. But give them oxygen and all that built-up alcohol becomes food too. This is called respiration. And uses a different pathway. Rather than deep diving into the biochemistry and frankly giving anyone who's taken a biology class PTSD flashbacks as we go over the citric acid cycle, the important part is this. When oxygen levels are low, many organisms use a backup system so they can continue to function. In humans and other animals, this means making lactic acid as an end product instead of water, which is what they normally make with oxygen. Which is also why your muscles feel like they're burning when you work out. They're starved of oxygen and are literally acidifying themselves trying to survive. In yeast, their end product is ethanol, but for them, the last step is reversible. If oxygen suddenly becomes available again, they have a special pathway to convert the built-up ethanol back into a usable carbon source so it's not wasted. So while vodka might not be a good food source, the yeast themselves are. Yeast extract is an incredibly common reagent in both microbiology labs and the pantries of most vegans, because it's super nutritionally dense. Sort of like how we can't eat grass, but we can eat cow. As such, we have used it countless times on the channel because it's the perfect food for a huge number of other microbes. And sure enough, we found a bacteria capable of surviving on nothing but pure yeast extract that also produces cellulose. Allow me to introduce, and bear with my pronunciation here, Commegatebacter hansenii. Commegatebacter? I don't know. I give up. Beyond making me want to say Gesundheit, and a nice reminder that biologists are terrible at naming things, it's an absolutely amazing species. It is one of many which are capable of producing cellulose, and while they of course would prefer to grow on solutions rich in glucose or other sugars, much like the Australians, they can survive on yeast extract. And for those that didn't realize that's what Vegemite is, Congratulations, now you know. Anyway, K. hansenii was originally isolated from kombucha, and anyone that's grown their own probably isn't that surprised. Kombucha famously grows a thick pellicle on the top of the culture that for a long time has been known to be about 50% cellulose, with the rest being proteins and other molecules. Those pellicles are actually amazing. Regardless of what you think about the drink, growing kombucha for the pellicle is a good time. If you dry it out and oil it, it forms a pseudo-leather that is remarkably strong, and it isn't a petroleum product like the other quote-unquote vegan leathers. However, kombucha is a mix of hundreds of different organisms. These pellicles are often called a SCOBY, or symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. By growing just K. hansenii, we can grow far more pure cellulose that is usable for all of the usual things that cellulose is good for. And it's one of the least picky organisms in the bunch, though it does require a lot of oxygen to grow well. As you can see, it also very readily forms pellicles of cellulose at the surface of a culture bottle. So our plan is to first use our bioreactor system to convert as much vodka into yeast biomass as possible, then boil the result, feed it to this
Okay, so kombucha is not as icky to me anymore. Like, it still kind of is.
Huh?
But yeah, don't have such an adverse reaction when I'm just watching it on screen.
Strength is one of those
It
things where you
smells
gotta use it or
horrible,
lose it.
though.
So, wanna train with me sometime?
Alright, that's going to be it for the stream. Good luck, fun, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Чем можно разбавить неловкое молчание?